On an extractor hose, you can get an inline filter, and that's a great idea. So you're not dumping a bunch of carpet fibers and other stuff you're sucking up into your unit. It catches in the hose itself and doesn't go anywhere. So, all right, let's do a quick Vevox poll. I think it's just one or two. The best tool for extracting water from hard surfaces, such as wood and concrete, is which of these?
It won't open up for some reason.
What's that?
It won't open up.
No, try pulling down with your fingers. Sometimes a little quirky. Sorry about that.
No, something with my phone, I think.
It looks like it might be cycling back through, which it kind of does. So, all right. If I'm going too fast for my apologies. Let's see what we got here. So that would be a squeegee wand. Yep. The subsurface extractor is for trying to get enough water out of the pad to dry it in place. That's not going to be effective at all on a hard surface. Also, something these right here, the water claw, this is definitely for carpet and pad. If you do this on glue down carpet, it used to be you'd have to go turn off the truck mount or you'd rip the handle off of it. Now they put a vacuum brake on there, so if you bend it back, but otherwise you won't get it off the carpet. So on this one's definitely a squeegee one. The three-dimensional harmonic toggle oscillator, those would work, but they're so expensive. Okay, that doesn't exist. I just kind of goof around there a little bit. So, all right. This should be number 4 on your review. The reviews are going to jump around because I changed the format. And I updated it one place, but not here yet. So I apologize for that. So microbial growth is more likely to occur when relative humidities are which of these? Which of these relative humidity levels would be most likely to have microbial growth occurring? Right. Still missing somebody, but we got most of you there. So, okay. So yeah, remember EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and ASHRAE, the Society of Engineers, they actually say that typically we're most comfortable as human beings in the indoor environment between about 30 and 55% relative humidity. ASHRAE just up theirs to 60%. So 30 to 60% is pretty normal for us, and we're pretty good with that. Just always remember, the more moisture in the air or in the materials, the greater chance for microbial growth. It needs water. So it's always going to be the highest number that's available. Number 38, which of the following is a vapor barrier or vapor retarding material? Or an example, which of these is a good example of a vapor barrier or a vapor retarding material? All right, see how we did on this one? Oh, there we go. Okay, on this one, we're looking for, so plywood sub 4 is really dense, but it's above that perm rating of being a vapor barrier. Wallboard is really porous, that dries really easily. A concrete slab without anything on it actually allows moisture to move in and out of it fairly well. The one here would be vinyl flooring. That's the one where it's always going to be an example. Vinyl wallpaper, vinyl flooring, that's going to be almost impossible for water molecules to make their way through. So that would be the best example of a or vapor barrier or retarding material for sure. So what is permeance? When we talk about permeance, what are we talking about here? Which of these would be referring to permeance or permeability? Nice. So this is going to be dun dun dun. That is correct. Number one, they're the indicator of the ability for vapor to move through material. It's a rating system for how well vapor can move through it. So the rate of evaporation from a non-porous surface, that's just how well the moisture leaves. And the indicator of condensation, again, those are both elements that we're talking about. But the permeance is actually the rating or indicator of how well vapor can move through a material, which tells us, can we dry that material or not? Or is it going to be a problem? So, all right, we're going to take a 10-minute break and then come back and we'll have about 40 minutes to talk about meters and maybe a little bit of documentation. So.
Pickpockets, 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 pick.
Barstow was built in the late 1800s. Barstow served as a stop for supplies and transport for the nearby boomtown of Calico, which at the time produced millions in silver and borax. But when silver prices crashed in the 1890s, Calico became a big step. And Barstow survived because of the railroad. Then cars came into the picture, and in the 1920s, Barstow pivoted to become a central stop on the U.S. Route 66. But everything would change again when World War II hit and the Marines showed up. The small town had to become a small.
Oh man, that sounded interesting.
All right, so some cameras back on and All right. So as we move into this next section, what page are we on?
As you go into moisture detector, you're 35.
35.
This is
So 6 pages off. Again, apologies for that. So this is, to me, one of the most important things we'll talk about, because when it comes to water damage, yes, we've got to go get the moisture out. We've got to dry it up. But our job is not just to dry. Our job is to dry and verify. And without meters, we can't know what we should be doing, and we can't know that we did it. And so this is such a key thing, to have the right equipment and to utilize the right equipment for drying things out. So on our moisture detection, as we get it, we're going to look at some different types of meters. It helps us know, again, what is wet and how wet it is. If we don't know how wet something is or how dry something is, how do we know what's affected or when we're done? Just like I was just talking about. We'll use these tools to establish what's called the dry standard. We'll talk about that on the next slide. And using our dry standard, we can set dry goals, which we'll talk about on the slide after that, and what they are and what they mean. There's a couple of different ways we'll use our moisture meters. One is through what is called the actual moisture content percentage. That is quantitative. It's a number, how much. The other ways we do it, the other way we do it, there's a couple of terms, is what's called the comparison scale, or qualitative, or relative. How is this compared to that, right? So to give an example, if I'm driving down the freeway and I want to know how fast I'm actually going, the number of miles per hour that I'm going, I would need some sort of a meter to tell me that. And fortunately, I have one on the dashboard. I have a speedometer. Okay, it's a speedometer, I know that, but it really is a meter that says you are right now doing, if it's 65 miles an hour and I'm like, wow, I'm doing 72. I wasn't paying attention. I better slow down a little bit. Or I was daydreaming. I'm only doing 53. I better speed up a little bit. Somebody's going to nudge me off the road. But it tells me this is how fast you are going, and I can compare that to what I should be doing. The other way, which we probably do on the freeway on busy traffic anyhow more than not, is a comparison. Sure, the speed limit's 65 miles an hour, but I'm just going along with traffic trying to get home. And at times it's going really well, and at other times it's going really slow. I'm just like, well, I'm going about the same speed as everyone else. Compared to them, I must be okay, right? And so we might be doing a few miles over the speed limit, a few miles under, but I'm just comparing myself to everyone else, and we're doing all right. And so one is how fast am I actually going? The other was compared to what's going on. So we do that with restorative drying, where sometimes we say, what's the actual moisture content of this material? Other times we say, I don't know what this material is, but I know it's the same material as out there in the unaffected area. So comparing that to this, I'm wet, or comparing that to this, it looks like I'm okay. We actually do that more than we think. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about what moisture content actually is and what it actually means. Sorry, did someone have a comment that I just cut off? All right. So let me just make it quick. All right, there we go. So as we look at these, one of the first things we do is determining what we call our dry standard. I like the way this is worded. A dry standard, what is that? It's a reasonable approximation, or it's not exactly precise. It's just saying it's pretty close to the moisture content or moisture level. I'm going to talk about the difference in those here in a bit, prior to a water intrusion. In other words, if there was no water damage here, what would this be normally? What would the amount of moisture in this plywood, in this carpet, in this drywall, in this Doug fir framing? What would it be if the water damage didn't hit it? What's normal for these materials?
7 to
Right.
11.
What was that?
7 to 11%.
It depends. It's a great question. That depends. I was using that as a very general example, so I'm glad you asked that. It depends on the type of material, the time of year, and the geographic location. So although that might generally hold for a lot of them, they're all going to be a little bit different. And it depends on the building that you're in, where you are, and again, the time of year. So, but yeah, a lot of times it'll be kind of in that range, but that's not a set in stone. So I'm glad you asked that. It's a very, very important question. So it tells us, and this is probably the most common way to do it, an acceptable method to get a dry standard, to establish my dry standard, is to evaluate similar materials in unaffected areas. So again, I got a bunch of water damage in here, and there's plywood that's wet, and Doug fir framing that's wet, and drywall that's wet. I'm going to go down the hall to another room that didn't have water damage in this building and take a reading in those materials. And that would probably be what these were if there wasn't water damage. So that's the most common ways to find an unaffected area. but sometimes there is no unaffected area. In the house, all the subfloors are wet, all the bottom plates are wet. I can't find anything that's not affected. In those instances, there's a couple of things we can do. I can reference similar structures or similar drawing projects. So I can say, you know what, I can't find it in this building, but I've done enough jobs in Reno, Nevada that I know that the plywood in Reno in February is going to be somewhere in the range of whatever it is, 8 to 12%. So I'm going to choose 12% or 11% or whatever. So I can say, historically, I know that this is about what it would be if there wasn't water damage. You can use USDA Forest Service guidelines or other wood equilibrium moisture content charts and say, well, in these conditions, it would normally be this. So there is, Joel's great point, at the end of the S500, there is a log for all different types of materials. I do want to point out, as we talked about before, that is, I don't know if it has moisture content in there, or it's more about salvageability based on category, but there is an equilibrium chart in there as well. But just to point out that is in the appendix, it's not part of standard of care, but it's a good reference. That's what it's designed to be, is a good reference that's in there. And so, I'm trying to remember if that has in there, they used to have the equilibrium moisture chart, and I can't remember if they left it in there or not.
Are more permeable materials going to have a higher dry moisture content than less permeable?
Say that again.
More permeable objects, like, are they going to have usually a higher dry moisture content than less permeable?
So the more permeable or hygroscopic, the more moisture it can hold. So those might be a little bit higher, yes. So typically my plywood will normally have more moisture than my hardwood. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, very good question. So yeah, they'll typically, the denser it is, the less moisture it's going to retain, typically. Not always, but oftentimes. So yeah. Joel, I don't think it does. I think it was in the reference guide before, but I'll look. I'm not seeing it just with a quick perusal, and I should know if it's in there, but I don't deal with the appendix as much, because for court cases, I don't use it because it's not part of the standard of care.
I think it should. It still should be in the 2021. Don't have it in front of me anymore, but I don't remember them taking it off.
Yeah, because on the Appendix A, it's really more about the categories and what you can and can't save, and what you can clean and what you can't.
It used to have the appendix with the moisture content at the back, with the framing and the wood flooring,
yeah. I don't think it's still in there, but I'll look and make sure.
Isn't the dry standard but for each room, or you're saying it to go to the other room? Because
that's a great question. The dry standard is for each material. So if I'm in this room and it's got wet plywood and Doug fir and drywall, I'm going to establish a dry standard for each individual material for my job.
In each room, or are you doing it for the entire house?
I'm pretty much doing it for the entire house. So if I come into the house and on this side of the house there are 3 bedrooms and a hallway and a bathroom that are affected, and down the hall, the other side of the first floor is the living room, dining room with the same materials, I'm going to go find the dry standard for those materials and use that for anything that's wet on those materials. I'm not going to, because I can't really do it for each room, because I have 3 bedrooms, I have a dining room and a kitchen. I'm just going off the material in that structure to make sure that what it is for that structure. Does that make sense?
They could have different standards. Not major differences, but they could have different.
Not quite enough to make a huge
deal.
So
they might, but the point I'm making is, if I have an unaffected dining room and I'm checking my plywood there, and then I've got 3 bedrooms that are wet, the only thing I can go off is my unaffected dining room. I don't know what these were before they got wet, or if they were different or not.
I'm saying if not all the rooms are wet. Not the entire. You have in what bedroom 1, 2, 3, 50% of the flooring is damaged.
Gotcha. So you can check the other half of the floor and check it?
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes rooms have different standards.
They can. In a house, I've never had it be far enough off to have even have a problem with that. So I've always, I might use the half of the room that's not affected to get my dry standard for everything, but I'm not personally, I'm not developing a dry standard for each room. It's for each material. And now if If it's the second and third floor or an office building and it's different area, then yes, I may do that for my drying chamber. But if I'm doing a plywood subfloor and I'm in the downstairs, I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna apply it to everything. Because again, it's a reasonable approximation. It's not pinpoint, it's saying reasonable approximation. And in that, unless there's something in that room that's, they've got a vinyl wallpaper and they keep the door closed or whatever, it would be very unlikely it would be very far different. So, one thing to keep in mind as well is that let's say I come into this building and this has got a plywood subfloor and this room's soaking wet and it's been wet for a week. Nobody's been here for whatever reason and it's soaking wet, water's wicked up the wall and it's just very, very wet. It's real humid in here. Well, remember we talked about at the very beginning of class is if no one's in here and the carpet's wet and the air is normal, then moisture is going to start to evaporate naturally out of that carpet into this air. And so the carpet's going to share with the air. Now this air has a lot more humidity than normal. It's going to say, hey, down the hall, I got more moisture than normal, and it's going to move through the air down the hallway. Now the air down the hallway has more moisture than it normally does, so it's going to say down the hallway, hey, plywood and drywall and ceiling tiles, here's some extra moisture. So I come in here after a week, and this area is sloshy wet, and down the hall it doesn't seem affected at all. But because of equilibrium, those actually might be higher than they would normally be because moisture has gone that direction as well. So I just need to take that into consideration when I'm trying to set up my dry standard and then maybe use some historical data to make sure that I'm really in the right spot for that. So,
or maybe don't take your dry standard from, say, a bathroom that's been, or a shower room that's been recently used.
Yeah, correct. Where it's leaking anyhow. Yeah. Make sure it's actually a dry standard. So yeah. Great point. So, all right. And then I can set my dry goal. Now, I want to point something out. If you've taken these classes before, have some history in it, that what it says now is during the initial response. So when I get there, I figure out my dry standard and then I set my dry goals, which are expected to do what? Well, primarily inhibit microbial growth and get me back to normal moisture. And that's it. So it used to have numbers. It used to say, if you're going to put drywall back over framing, that framing should be below 16% moisture content. If you're trying to dry a hardwood floor, then you should have a difference no more than 2 to 4% between the hardwood and the plywood subfloor, for example. And those are actually pulled from the installation guides from the National Hardwood Association. Hardwood products should be within 4%. There was a bunch of different materials with different numbers. Those have all been removed. It now simply says, don't let microbes grow and get it back to what you consider normal for that. So you've got to set your own goals. All right. It does say it's recommended, not a should, not a shall. It's recommended that your drying goal be within 10% of the dry standard. It says that the dry goal can be at or above the dry standard. So I might say, well, everything's between 7 and 9%. I know that if it was, summertime, it would be as high as 11%. So that's a range where I'm not concerned about mold and it's not going to cause structural damage. So I'm going to set my goal at 11%. That's okay if you want to do that. What this is saying is within 10%, that's 10% of. So in other words, if your dry standard is 9% and you're going to use this right here, then 10% of 9 is 0.9. So if my unaffected area is 9%, I would set my dry goal for 9.9%. If my unaffected is 10%, I would set this at 11%. If it's 8%, 8.8. It's not saying you should do that. It's just a recommendation whether you want to do that or not. So, all right. So drying goals are our target. That's what we're saying. That's what I've got to get to. So one of the tools we use to get there is a moisture sensor or moisture meter. Let me just grab one back here real quick. Let me ask this question real quick. Have any of you ever had a 9-volt battery on your tongue? Get some weird looks when I ask that question. If you look at this, it has both the positive and negative lead right there on the top. So if you put it on your tongue, it completes the circuit and you get a little zap. It doesn't hurt, but it gets your attention. It's a real quick way to see if the battery's any good or not. Well, the reason I mention that is because this right here is basically a glorified 9-volt battery. Depending on the model, it's got a 9-volt battery down in the handle or up in the head of this. It's got a couple of wire leads going all the way down, and those are going to connect to these prongs, these probes right here. And so if there's enough moisture to complete the circuit, and there is in my hand, I'll grab this. You're going to get a little blinky light and a beeping noise. It says, hey, the circuit's been completed. So if I poke this into the carpet, beep, beep tells me the carpet's wet. Beep, 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 no beep, beep. Now I know where I can move my furniture to. Because I have too many times over the years that the top of the carpet feels dry. We move all the furniture to that side of the room and then find out the pad's wet for another 4 feet underneath it. We move all the furniture again. And so the idea behind this is, so thank you for that, Steve. If you can't get your camera working for whatever reason, I'll give you another prompt. Sounds like you've got it. If you just want to log in with an iPhone or an iPad or Android or whatever, just log in without sound. And then, so we've got it. We do need to get you on camera. So if you can play with that and let us know, that'd be great. All right. Okay, so this is a very basic tool, and that's designed to find wet carpet and pad, and that's its job in life. And then it goes back on the truck until day one of the next job that you're working on. It's very simple. This is a yes tool. It's not a no tool. What I mean by that is this will go down to about 17 to 19% moisture content, and it will stop beeping. There's some literature out there that shows you can still have potentially microbial growth or corrosion in wood, metal fasteners in wood, at about 16% moisture content. So this could stop beeping before you actually have a problem. This is meant for really wet, sloshy things like carpet. Yep, it's wet. Back on the truck. I have been on job sites and seen people with one of these at the quote-unquote end of the job, poking this into the plywood subfloor and the drywall and the ceiling joist and going, it's not beeping, we must be dry. This does not know dry, it only knows wet. This is just an indicator of what's wet. That's what it's for. Okay, so make sure we don't use it for more than it's designed to do. Also, I just want to point out, guy goes in and sees his doctor. He says, doctor, you got to help me. I'm just in intense pain. What's the matter? Anywhere I touch, it hurts so bad. If I touch my neck, it hurts. If I touch my back, it's excruciating. My elbow, doctor, you got to help me. I can't keep doing this. The doctor's concerned and does a thorough examination and finds out this poor guy is suffering from a broken finger. So anywhere he touches, it hurts real bad. Okay, my point is you can get bad information with a moisture meter or a sensor, right? If you poke this into pet urine, it's the salts and alkalis are going to complete the circuit. It's going to beep. And I know what everyone says. Oh no, my dog never pees in the house. Nope, not so you're backing out of the driveway. Then Fluffy's writing his name in the living room. Sorry, but that's just the reality. And you start rolling the carpet up and there's all those orange stains. And like, Fluffy, man, we had a deal. I put in a dog door for you and everything. And the dog's like, the game was on. It's cold outside. Sorry. And so you just, again, you can get false positives. I've seen many times when someone's building a home, and as they're building the home, they cut the holes in for the heat registers for the furnace. And then for whatever reason, when they're putting up walls or whatever, they go, oh, that hole should have been over another 2 feet. So they take some sheet metal and they tack it in to cover the hole. Well, if you're poking this through the carpet and you hit sheet metal, it's gonna beep, right? So we always verify. We'll talk more about false readings a little bit later on, but we always make sure we're getting a good reading. So that's what this is for. That's its purpose in life. And then we're done with it till the next job. And I will just say that I mentioned that I have had a 9-volt battery on my tongue. I mentioned earlier that I have 3 older brothers. So I will just say I did not choose all of my own life experiences, and I'll just leave it at that. The rest is really kind of between me and my therapist. So as we're looking at the different types of meters, there's a couple that we'll be using. There is a pin type meter, and there is a pinless meter. Oftentimes the pin meter is also called an invasive meter, a destructive meter, a penetrating meter, things like that. And the pinless meter is called a scan meter, a non-invasive meter, a non-destructive meter, or a non-penetrating meter. Some people don't like to call that a non-penetrating meter because technically the signal does penetrate. It does go into the material, but it doesn't cause any damage when it does that. It's just a radio frequency or a electromagnetic reading that's going in there. And so on these, just like on my sensor, it's reading between the 2 prongs that are in the material. the more water, so water doesn't conduct electricity, but the impurities do. The more water content in the material, the less resistance and the easier electricity can go, the higher number you're going to get. So it knows what the moisture, what it should be if it's like normal Doug fir, and it knows the difference between that. The pinless meter is more like, for lack of a better term, it reminds me of a dolphin, right? The dolphin swimming through the ocean sends out that sonar signal and then interprets what comes back. So doot, 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 oh, that's a rock. I'm going to swim around that, right? Hey, that's a fish. I'm going to have some lunch. So it sends out a signal and then interprets it. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment. Our invasive meter can tell us the moisture content or the moisture level of the materials. Again, I'm going to talk about the difference in those in a minute and how we want to be careful with that. So it can give me quantitative, it is 17% moisture, or qualitative. Okay, the number it's giving me is 30, and out there it's 14, so I know what I've got to get back down to. I'm going to compare affected to non-affected of the same material. I can't compare Doug fir to plywood. I've got to make sure that I'm comparing the same materials. And again, it's just that electrical conductivity between the probes. There's a lot of different types of probes that we can use. This one right here. So do you see some drywall on here somewhere? I don't know what I did with it. If you look at this right here, it has these long probes. These are, the green on here is a non-permeable waterproof coating. And then on the end of these, there's no coating on there. And so what this allows me to do is, let's say that I'm trying to see if there is any moisture in my wall cavity, my insulation or sheeting or whatever, and the drywall's wet. Well, if I poke this through the drywall and there's no coating on here, as soon as the wet drywall touches it, it's going to go off. I have no idea what's happening here. Because I don't get a reading along the shaft, only on the ends, I can go right through wet drywall, and now I can see if I hit insulation, siding, something like that. A couple things to keep in mind on this is, I need to also treat this as a yes tool and not a no tool. And what I mean by that is, if I go into the wall and nothing reads, it's like, okay, that doesn't mean the wall cavity is dry. It means right there it's dry. I could have wet insulation 6 inches or 6 feet away. So I've got to take enough readings to really represent the area that I'm checking. Also, a lot of times on your framing, you'll have a little metal plate to cover plumbing, so you don't put a nail or a screw in it. If you hit one of those, it won't know the difference. It'll just give you a nice high reading. So you got to make sure that what I'm reading is actually what I want to be reading on that. So you can see in the lower left right here, I pull back the carpet base, I can get an idea of if there's something's happening inside that wall. If it's metal framing, I go enough of an angle and hit that, again, it's going to go off. These are what we oftentimes call short pins or drywall pins. I like to start non-invasive. I don't want to poke holes if I don't have to, but sometimes you do. This right here is called a hammer probe electrode. It's a great tool. And the idea behind this is it has a shaft on here and it has a weight. And what that allows me to do is use this as a hammer and drive it in and back out so I can get deep into my materials and get a reading not just on the surface of the material, but all the way down through to make sure it's actually dry all the way through. Or I can say, am I getting a reading in the hardwood or in the plywood below it? These are also coated along the shaft, so I only get a reading on the tip right here. One thing you've got to be careful about is, grab this here real quick. If you drive in too deep and you hit these retainer clips right here, these nuts, then you'll get the reading down here instead of up here. And so one thing I like about this, you can see in the picture on the lower right, I come in on day one, I extract all the water, I fold the carpet back, I pull out the wet pad, I put my carpet back in place, I start the drying process. The next day, I want to check my subfloor. I don't want to pull the carpet back every day. Well, because of the coating on the pins, I can go right through the carpet and know that my reading is in my subfloor. But if I go too far, I get a reading on the pins. So a lot of times what I'll do is get a little piece of duct tape and fold it over and go through that so there's no way it's going to hit. Or get one of these plastic coated paper plates and go right through that. And now I'm only going to get a reading right there and just kind of take this around the room. But I want to make sure I'm not letting my wet carpet touch on those or I'm going to get a bad reading on it. So, all right. And then I have seen companies that will go to their plywood subfloor. Obviously this is connected to the meter, it's not cordless. And they'll boom, and then write down the reading. 1/8 of an inch, here's my reading. 3/8 of an inch. 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, all the way down. I don't have a problem with that. But I mean, that is basically how I do it. So I definitely want to make sure I work my way all the way through that subfloor. And then I personally write down the highest reading because that's the one that I care about. I want to know the highest reading is what I've got to get back down. So if you want to write down every reading all the way through this, again, nothing wrong with that. But I'm always most concerned about the highest reading that's in there. I saw this on Facebook. Jason says, know how to use your meter. I've done $1 million in residential water jobs using this year with a $40, and I blurred out the name of it. No, I used to be, the year before I was with a large company, we were using, it's not Exertech, it's X-Tech. But I like this meter because it's accurate to a point, but they're cheap enough, it doesn't matter if I wear out the moisture pad. I guarantee that Jason's brochure does not say, we use electronic meters that are accurate to a point. We're going to save your home, you know, that you've got $300,000-$400,000 home, $1 million home, $3 million home with a meter that's accurate to a point. I got it for $40, but you know, what if it breaks? So it's just, you know, that's kind of like if you went to the doctor and the doctor comes in the door and you're waiting to find out what's wrong with you and this is the equipment they have, right? So yes, you can get a meter for $40, but it's not going to be consistent enough in the long run. The meters we should be using are high-end meters. This is our business. This is what we do. I would recommend staying with the ones that are kind of catering to our marketplace. So you have Tramex, you have FLIR, X-Tech, and that's the same company. FLIR bought X-Tech about 12 years ago. They're actually starting to brand together. You're going to have Delmhorst, and you're going to have Protometer. Those are the ones that, like I said, are really marketing to our industry. There's also Wagner. I don't see them much in our space, but they're definitely a high-end meter company. Also, there's a German one, GAN. I know some people use that. That's NN, not M, but anyhow. So you're going to spend for a decent meter minimum of probably $400. And for a kit, you're going to be $1,100 to $2,300, $2,400 to really get the stuff that we need, you know, in our market to do that. So, all right. So again, I don't just want to take a reading at the top of the wood because maybe I go in and I'm like, hey, I'm at 13%, I'm dry. But I go a little bit deeper and find out, oh, it's 27% down there. And oh, at the bottom, it's really wet. So I've got it might be, sometimes it's wet on the top, sometimes on the bottom, depending on the source and, you know, some different factors. But I can't just use my short drywall pins on the top of the subfloor and go, oh, looks like I'm dry. You could still be very, very wet and have a problem. So I mentioned before, this right here is what's called the bottom plate or the base plate. If it's around the perimeter, it's a sill plate. This would be my subfloor, plywood, OSB, Advantech. This is my framing right here. And one of the places that's hard to dry and hard to verify is where water gets between my subfloor and my bottom plate. You know, if I take a hammer probe right here, I don't know why that's going so weird. My pins might come in, what, a 1/2 inch? What about all this? How do I know that it's actually dry or not? And so what a lot of people will do in that situation, really? Is shuffle around a lot looking for what they're trying to find. I can't find the one I want, but these will work. And so what we'll do sometimes is we'll say, hey, here we go. So I've got my subfloor right here, and I've got my bottom plate right here, and it's wet all the way through, but my hammer probe's only going to go in just a little bit right here. So what they'll do is take screws and drive them somewhere in that assembly right there going in, and then you can come by with your short pins. You can see that okay. And touch the heads of the screws right there, and they just become an extension all the way through. So depending on whether it's a 2x4 or 2x6, then it depends on how long of the screws I'm going to get while I'm working on that. Couple things on that, if that's the method you're going to use. Very common method to use. One is, if I'm going to use that to determine what's dry in here, I have to use the same method in my unaffected area. Put screws in, check it, and then come in. So for me, if that's what I'm doing, I would come into this room. Let's say I'm drying this wall. I'd put 2 on this edge, 2 in the middle, and 2 in the corner. And then every day when I come to check my job, I'm doing hammer probes all through the field. I'm going to go over here and touch those 2, touch those 2, and touch those 2, and dry every day. And on day 4 or 5 or 6, they come back indicating they're dry. At that point, I'm going to back them out. I'm going to move over 12 or 15 inches and put them back in, and I'm going to verify the entire wall. So I'll use those as an indicator till those indicate they're dry, but I'm still going to verify the entire wall is dry. Now, the temperature of the material will impact and adjust, we'll talk more about this, the accuracy of the meter. If you've ever backed a screw out and touched it, it'll burn the heck out of your finger. So you've got to be able to leave it in there long enough to cool down again, or otherwise you could be getting some false readings in there while you're doing it. All right, I know I put my clicker right here somewhere. It's got to be right in front of me because I didn't go very far.
And when he took it apart at his house last week. So
one thing I forgot to mention this morning is sometimes, especially toward the end of the day when you've been on Zoom all day long, is we kind of forget we're on mute, and I'll have somebody walks in, starts a conversation, or somebody answers the phone and forgets they're on Zoom and they start talking. What I typically do when that happens is I'm just going to listen for a minute. And if I think what you're talking about is more interesting than what I'm talking about, we're going with it. So you've been warned. I'm just letting you know where that could go. So, all right. So if I'm using screws, Delmhorst just did some research, and they said, most of us say use stainless steel screws. There's nothing wrong with that. But they just did some research and said they've had better success with brass or zinc. As long as I'm using the same thing, if I'm using stainless steel out there, use stainless steel in here. You want to make sure that they are parallel and evenly spaced when you're doing it, so you're getting good information while you're moving along. On my non-invasive meters, what in the world did I do with my clicker? I literally just had it. It's got to be close by here. That's all right. Oh, there it is. Who hit it? Who hit it down there? I know one of you did it. I'll find out. Got the video. Okay, on a non-invasive meter, something I want to point out here. So I have 2 non-invasive meters here, and these are great for things that I either don't want to poke holes into or I can't poke holes into. So for example, a vinyl floor, vinyl wallpaper, ceramic tile. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I've got really good news for you. We weren't sure if the water got under your vinyl floor in the kitchen. We just took a bunch of readings in there, and the vinyl floor is totally dry. It was not affected by the water at all. Oh, yeah, sorry about all the holes. Well, that's not going to go well, obviously. And so with a non-invasive meter on a vinyl wallpaper, vinyl floor, ceramic tile, it allows me to get an idea if there's an anomaly or a difference before I start getting really, really invasive on things and start doing some damage and stuff. Because I don't want to ruin something that's dry and not affected by it. So it's a great way to just to quickly get an idea if this is different than that, right? Resilient floor, all that kind of stuff. It's going to send a signal into the material. Great for, like I said, vinyl stuff I don't want to poke holes in. Resilient floors I get there. What I want to point out is if I come over here to the wall, I think I have this set up to follow me around. Let me check. If I come over here, that chasing me, there we go. And I take these 2 meters right here. So I have the Delmhorst Navigator Pro, I have the Protometer MMS2, and as far as I know, this wall is unaffected by drywall. I'm going to put them both up on the wall here, and the meter in my left hand is reading 12, and the meter in my right hand is reading 88. Wait, what? Okay, why is that? Well, because it's a relative scale, and because of that, they can use whatever setting, whatever range I should say they want. Let me give you an example of that. You'll come out of a restaurant, and on the way out they say, hey, thank you for having dinner here tonight. Would you please give us, just right here on a scale of 1 to 5, how do we do? And you go, well, it was a good meal and good service. I enjoyed it. So you give them a 4. 4 out of 5. That's not a bad score. That's okay. A couple of days later, you're at another restaurant across the street, and on the way out they say, hey, how do we do? And you go, I would give you guys a 4. And they go, what did we do wrong? Was the service bad? Was the food terrible? Why is it such a low score? Low score, I gave you a 4. Well, then you find out that while these guys were on a scale of 1 to 5, they were happy with a 4. These guys were on a scale of 1 to 10. They're not happy with a 4. On that scale, 4 is terrible. Well, because it's a relative scale, The Navigator Pro chooses a scale of 0 to 300. The MMS2 has a scale of 60 to 999. The MMS3 is 70 to 999. Tramex, FLIR, X-Tech, those are 0 to 99 or 99.9. They're all completely different scales. You cannot mix and match meters. So just be aware of that. They're all very, very different. You have to use the same meter on the same job because they're very, very different scales. And you can get in trouble. Let's say, for example, that I go to a job site where my meter here tells me, let's say that I'm checking the drywall. I go to the unaffected drywall, and I read that at, let's say, 280 on this meter. It wouldn't be nearly that high, but let's just say it's, for the illustration here, let's say it's 280. So I say unaffected is 280, and the wet area is pegging the meter at 999. So I write down wet area 999. Our goal is, let's say we set a goal at 280. Let's just go with 280 on the goal. So this is our goal right here. The next day I'm heading to the job site and I get a flat tire. So I call my team member. I say, hey, Susie, I'm supposed to head to that job, got a flat tire. Are you anywhere near this? She goes, I am right around the corner. Let me take care of that. So she shows up on the job site and she's using a Delmhorst that pegs out at 300. So she's not going to go take the unaffected. She just pulls up the paperwork and says, our goal is 280. Well, after drying for a day, she puts this on there and it's at 275. She's like, woohoo, we're dry. Not on this meter, we're not. And so she leaves it soaking wet and pulls all the equipment off and thinks we dried in a day. So you've got to make sure you understand the system of what how the meters are actually working. Let's say we're traveling on a job site somewhere. We've been there for 4 or 5 days. We come out of the hotel, we get in the rental car, and it says that there's 1/8 of a tank of gas. How many gallons of gas is that? I have no idea. It doesn't quantify it for me, right? So is that information helpful? It doesn't even tell me how much gas, but is it useful information? Yeah, and here's why. I don't know how big the gas tank is. 1/8 of a tank would be different for a Prius and a big pickup truck. What I do know is on that particular car, this is full where I want to be, this is empty where I don't want to be, and I am right there. So I better get some gas. I'm going to wind up on the side of the road somewhere. It's just a comparison. Here's good, here's bad, here's where you are. So a non-invasive meter, we went to this job. In the unaffected area of the wood floor where there was no issues, it said 90. That number, I want to point out that the first number you get on any one of these meters is completely, totally, and absolutely worthless and meaningless. It means nothing until I have another number to compare it to. This does not know if I'm putting it on plywood, hardwood, plastic, plaster, ceiling tile. It just sends out a signal and says, whatever that is, it's 300, it's 200, it's 199. It doesn't know. And so 90 to 265, now I know that using this meter on this wood floor only, 90 is dry, 265 is wet, and I've got to dry it back down to within 10% if that's the goal I'm using to get it to that. All right, and it's very possible that the unaffected could have been 265, and well, not on this meter, but on the protometer, maybe unaffected is 265, and wet is 789. Who knows? So the number doesn't mean anything until I make a comparison affected to unaffected on the exact same material. A couple other quick things as we wrap up our day. There are some meters, the Tramex, that are calibrated to give you like a percentage undug for non-invasive. Most of them don't. That's not what they're designed to do. It doesn't give a percentage. It just says, here's empty, here's full. Here's two numbers to compare. Here's the number I'm assigning to the unaffected part of the material, and here's the number I'm assigning to the affected, and you got to get those back to where they should be. I see this all the time, where people take the number, 152, and they divide by 100 to get the moisture content, and they say, oh, well, that must be 15.2. No, it can't be. Matter of fact, my son sent me this from Facebook. And I'm not trying to knock this guy.
Pick up how much moisture content is in any surface that you put it on. Now, that's not 129. That's actually 12.9% moisture content in there. This
absolutely incorrect, and I can prove it. Because I took these 2 meters and put them on the drywall over there, and this one said 12 and this one said 88. So using that methodology, the drywall is either 1.2% or 8.8%, and it can't be both. So please don't ever do that. I will find you and I will slash your tires, and it will be totally appropriate. So learn how to use your meter on that. But I see that's so common, and it's wrong. But somebody told him that crane flies eat mosquitoes, and that's what he believes. So I get it. I understand that. So, all right. We're going to start off tomorrow with moisture content. It's not a difficult thing. It doesn't take that long, but we've only got a couple minutes left. So thank you. Got through a lot of information today. We've got a couple more days that are packed. We will be going 4 o'clock Pacific time tomorrow, and plan on that also for Thursday. We got a lot to cover still. So that's what we have. Work on your homework tonight for gallons of water. We'll do those together tomorrow morning. You've got the 42 question review. Jump into that, start moving ahead and trying to find the information. We will be tomorrow getting into psychrometry. I would definitely recommend going into your manual and reading up on the terms of relative humidity and humidity ratio and vapor pressure and what they are. So it's kind of familiar. And also, if you want to go online and start the practice test on our website, you're welcome to do that. I'm here for any questions that anybody has. If not, we are done for the day. Thank you, but I'll stick around for questions. I will be here on Zoom tomorrow morning, 20 minutes before class starts. And if not, thank you. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It's been a fun day.
All right, Darren, I've got one for you that I came across on the break. And I'm not asking this from an adversarial standpoint at all. I'm actually curious to get your reaction because it's hysterical. So this is on the one of the claim adjuster Facebook group. 50,000 people on this thing. So some anonymous participant, what he actually put the question or his comment, or wasn't that big a deal. But he goes, "I'm seeing more and more mitigation companies charging for drying by the square foot. First, I was skeptical, but the more I'm seeing it, the more I'm beginning to like it. Who else is seeing people do this?" But here's the comment that really got my attention. So another anonymous participant, naturally, no one can put their names on these things. So a couple people, their answers were said, "Hey, make sure whatever you do, it follows the IICRC standards." They're like great answers, right? So then somebody goes, "Well, we had a claim go to court, and the IICRC standards got totally trashed because they were not able to provide any science behind their standards. The IICRC is frauds." Obviously, it is the standard, though. So I'm just curious, kind of where something stupid like that comes from, other than stupidity. What kind of?
So I'm gonna address both those comments. First of all, I was actually on a task force for a company I was with years ago to look at square foot pricing, and I could see that happening. I mean, you look at Xactimate and the big insurance carriers; they 100% have the number. They know on a class 2, category 3, they know exactly what the average is per square foot. That'd be an easy number to come to. One of the concerns there's a lot of things I like about it. I'm going to charge you this much a square foot, regardless of how much equipment I use. I'm going to get in, get it dry, get out. The problem is you're going to have people going, "Well, if I'm doing that, I'll just do a lot more demo. I'll be done faster and make more money." So that's concern. So understand that the IICRC, the standards are consensus based. They're not a science. Now, yes, obviously they go and try and say, "Here's why we're doing this and here's what it is." But as a consensus saying, here's what is happening in the field by prudent members. This is the normal thing to do, and this is what we've agreed going through the process of what it is. So, I mean, like the air mover calculations, yes, they've gone through and done a bunch of testing. They can say, here's why we selected that, but there's a lot of science that is missing. And so, I can see both ways. You can get into court and someone, no matter what it is, you can have someone knock it out and say, "Well, because of this and this, that's not legit." And so it's a consensus-based standard that says this is what's happening in the field by those who are doing the job correctly. And everybody that does that has had a chance to look at it. But yeah, you can always bash something for sure.
It sounds like bad legal representation or expert testimony too. Because if it's a standard that, like, okay,
and that's what the focus is. This is the standard of care. And if you got someone that doesn't understand how to talk about that, then the jury's going to go, "Well, you're just."
Did my phone?
So, we don't see.
Those are good thoughts. I was curious.
Video.
I think FEMA charged by the square foot, if I remember something like.
Steve, I don't see you. Sorry, go ahead, Joel.
I'm saying I think FEMA charges something like that. I can't remember what it was last time we did a flood claim. It was something they do quick calculations. They don't go by drawing. They're like wet, remove it, and we calculate for what you did.
Yeah, they do have calculations for how many air movers and stuff, but the FEMA stuff is completely different than anything else. Yes.
Yeah. Darren, do you want to hear about that 5-story dentist
Yeah.
building, or do you?
Yeah.
By the way, was it KW Specialty Insurance in Mesa where the adjuster argued with you?
No.
Oh,
And he
they're
wasn't
based
arguing.
out of
He
Arizona,
was saying he
so it
didn't
wouldn't
buy it.
surprise me.
Also, it was in fun, but he still didn't believe me. So, but no, it wasn't.
An adjuster wouldn't surprise me, but we had in our building it was they were doing renovations on the 6th floor, and the plumber didn't weld the pipe correctly, so he flooded from the 6th down to the entry, which had a chiropractor, gym, and just 5 stories of just dentists in Santa Monica. So whatever you think yours was losing, multiply it by I don't know.
Holy
So
moly.
you had the property manager, the contractor, the plumber, the hygienist, the public adjuster, the dentist, of course. All of them were just going up and down the building for you're saying 5 days. We had to do it probably, I think in 10 days we finished it. A 40-man crew working 2 shifts. And that included demolition because there was no drying in place.
Yeah.
And clearances.
That is crazy. Holy moly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, a lot of
Thanks
fun.
for telling me that.
I do have 2 questions when you have a second.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
please,
didn't
go
mean to
ahead.
interrupt.
No, I'm out.
You're good. That's fair. Thanks, Joel. Yeah, go ahead.
So I've had issues with mold staining on framing and stuff, and I was curious about your opinion on that and removing it.
So when I was doing mold work, I had my contract literally I had my main contract. Here's what we're doing. Here's the unit price. Here's what we're charging. And then sign here. And I had 13 or 14 or maybe more specific items I had to initial that said, we're going to build a containment. We'll do the best we can and not cause any damage. But if we put holes in the drywall or duct tape on the carpet, that's not our problem. That's part of the job. And we had a very specific that they had to initial that said, this is for mold remediation, not staining removal. The staining is part of the life cycle of the mold. We do not remove stains. If you'd like an estimate for that, let us know. And you could use some sort of a hydrogen peroxide. There's chemicals that are made to remove the staining for the mold, but we made it very clear when we're done. You know, it is not a good example, but if someone said, hey, you know, my dog pooped on the carpet and that's gross, my kids are in here, it's like, I can disinfect it and clean it potentially, but there's still going to be a stain, right? I can get the Kool-Aid off, but there's still red stain. So we actually had an initial that said, this is not stain removal, this is mold remediation. That's a different service we can give you a quote for.
Got you. And my second question was drying tile and how you feel about that. If it's
Drying
more work
tile,
just removing
we're going to talk
it,
about this, and I'm going to have a lot of, let me start by saying drying tile. Are you talking about over concrete, over wood, or both?
let's say over wood because that's what I have more experience with.
We are going to talk more about this in class, so I won't go too deep into it here, but I will simply say, according to the S500, with a category 1, you can save and dry tile over a wood substrate that water's gotten underneath it. Once it's category 2 or above, the S500 says the tile's got to go so you can inspect, clean, and dry the subfloor. Having said that, I know a lot of people do it successfully. I mostly don't because I'm trying to dry from above and below, and I don't have good airflow between the two, so I'm going to increase my temperature. And when I increase the temperature with limited airflow, that does 2 things really effectively. Warm temperatures dry things and grow things. I like half of those. I don't like the other half. So I typically have torn out tile over a wood subfloor because I worry about that.
Got you. Yeah, most of the time we tear it out. Your camera went out, by the ways. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Thank you for answering my questions.
I'm not sure why it died, but thanks for letting me know. I appreciate that. So. Yeah, that's really weird. It might not be getting charged from this. Oh. Okay, that's good to know. So that one won't charge it. Interesting. Okay. I'm still here if someone's got a question.
Doing homework.
I sent in the text if I can get a copy of the sheet you said you have them signed for the mold removal.
If you will, thank you, Reginald, appreciate that. If you will send me an email with that request, I will see if I can find it and send it over to you.
I'll do that. Thank you, Darren.
You bet. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you for your time also today. It was very nice.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It was a fun day.
It's nice seeing a variety of people too, because it's
Yeah.
not like all, it's gonna be all ATI guys and just want to get a variety of people, variety of different backgrounds, where they're coming from.
Yeah,
Want to do this,
it's fun.
that's really good.
Why won't my camera turn back on there? All right. All right. Yep, there we go. Oh, ouch. I'm getting a headache. There we go.
See you in the morning.
Sounds good. Felipe, anything else before we go? Anybody else?
No, I'm actually doing the homework right now.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm going to turn to this. Have a great night.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Bye.